Hello, here we are again. My friend Lucy McCarrer who invited me to this podcast. Me, Lisette Schuitmaker in Amsterdam, Lucy in London. No, not in London, in Norfolk, somewhere else, in the country. Invited me to the podcast on the year of being 70 because we both turned 70, me a month earlier than she. So I'm already 70 and a half. You're almost 70 and a half now. And we talk about our lives. We look back at our lives, the times we've lived through, the way our parents behaved, the way we grew up as young women, and our lives at 70 that are not sitting behind the geraniums and, reading Agatha Christie or whatever. We are still very dynamic women.
We certainly are. And this week we're going to talk about my book launch, your investor conference, and also a play that we have both seen in London called The Years by Annie, well, based on a memoir by Annie Ernaux, which I think has really kind of spoken to both of us. Very, very powerful piece of theatre.
Yeah, because it is also our years that she speaks about. I think she's a little older than us.
I think she's about 14 years older than us. She
Okay.
was born literally just after the war, I think in
Yeah.
44, 45, something like this. But the book and the play takes you through that's why it's called The Years, the eras as well, up to now. And it's exclusively through her eyes, but she presents it as the view of women going through, not just one woman,
Yeah.
all women going through this period. So it very, very much maps onto, our 70 years. I think she's obviously a bit older than us, but it is the same experience, more or less. And I felt as I was watching it, I sort of felt this is our podcast on stage. This is how it could be. This is how it could be staged, talking about lots of similar sorts of things. So childhood, the grown-ups and the culture and the stories you begin with as a child and then getting into adolescence and in
But
her.
she's very explicit. She's much more explicit than we ever are,
Oh
Lucy.
yeah,
So
oh yeah,
she brings in sex and masturbation and abortion and really, big life events.
yeah,
Uh, and also, of course, being somewhat older, I've never really been part of the feminist movement or any women's liberation. I felt it's so completely natural that I, as a woman, could do things that the boys could do. But she was more at the forefront of that. So that's very much in there. And as you say, it's five actresses, and they speak not of I, but they speak of we. And I thought that was so powerful because only through just by the use of that word we, she speaks for the experiences of women and what we go through and how we are beleaguered by men sometimes. And then what I haven't done, but what you have done, the whole phase of children and kind of the smaller life.
yeah,
And then these children, she also has two boys, right? Like you,
yeah.
and you were with your two boys. I
Yeah,
find that very interesting.
yes, it was interesting because my two sons and I have a sort of little theatre club. We go to the theatre every
Lovely.
couple of months or something and have dinner and discuss. And so yes, we saw this together, and amazingly, one of my sons was so overcome by one of the description and the act. It's not just a description, although it is
No,
very
no, it's
everything in the play is the words from the book, and
but
it's
it's also very they really acted
it
out.
is absolutely. And the scene where she describes going through a backstreet abortion was so powerful that it actually made one of my sons kind of quite faint. I mean, he had to leave the auditorium.
Oh,
And amazingly, when he went out, he found 10 other people out there for the
really?
same reason. And the staff, I mean, I noticed that when he went out of the row, two of the theatre staff came to him and helped him out. And it wasn't because it was, he was a one off. That happens every single night. And they actually said 10 people was a low number. So that scene where she describes the abortion, and it's very, it's not, I mean, it's kind of graphically done. There's some red paint, but it's very clearly red paint, and it's just the words really, and it's so much. I think it's so painfully from the woman's point of view, and I think that is so rarely shown. And
Yeah.
anyway,
No, that is very rarely shown.
yeah,
And it's interesting that you say it's just the words, because for me, that word we was very powerful, always speaking in we. But for me, also the energy of the five actresses of various ages, but they don't stick to that. The young one plays the older one, the older one plays the younger one, and they put so much energy in, and you just feel energetically also where they are in their lives and how frustrated they are and how hopeful they are and how in love they are. I thought it was phenomenal.
amazing. It was an amazing piece of ensemble
Yeah.
and performance. It really was absolutely stunning. I hope it comes back. I mean, it was pretty much sold out very quickly. And the audience was interesting. I think the audience was mainly, when the night I was there, was mainly older. I didn't see a lot of young people in the audience, but I may not have, just seen it. But it was, I mean, it was certainly mixed genders. It wasn't just women or anything
No.
like that. But I think it was so. I mean, my sons said afterwards it was so powerful because it was absolutely the intermediated, is that the right
Yeah.
word?
Yeah.
Women's gaze, women's experience. Normally, a few weeks ago, we saw Three Sisters by, Chekhov. A lovely performance, but it's a man writing about women, and
Yeah.
it is very much about the women's feelings, but it's not the same. And this was so, and they just felt it was so unusual, and they hadn't realized how unusual it was to have that purely female view and describe the experiences of going through the decades, going through relationships. I mean, she had gone through having this abortion first, being in love and not working out, then getting married, then having children, then getting divorced, then living on her own, and then and writing as well. And it was
Yeah.
it spoke to obviously both of us.
Yeah, very much, very much. I was very happy I went. And it also last year suddenly I realized that I'm also part of women's suppression because I suppress myself. I adapt. And of course, in social environments, you always kind of adapt somewhat. But I think, still adapting to the men's world and the men's way of being because of needing to be accepted and taken seriously.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I resolved to do less of that. And I think, and here we come back to our theme, that being 70 actually is helpful to me.
Yeah, I completely agree. I feel, and I don't know whether it's partly doing this podcast and sort of talking about things that I would never normally talk about, and certainly not in a public kind of way. It's been very liberating, and I do feel. I mean, for example, I do not feel that I have to hide my age at all, which I might have done if we had not been, doing this. And yes, I feel it is liberating being older because I think one of the problems for women is that we need to be liked, and not just we need to be liked, we need to be likable, or people don't take us seriously because then we tip over into the abrasive, difficult bitch kind of scenario. And so we can't behave like men because men can be tough and rude, and it doesn't undermine their authority. On the contrary, sometimes it builds it. But
It builds our authority. Yes, exactly. Yeah.
but if we
Whereas
behave
then we are bossy and
yeah,
yeah,
bossy. Yes, there are a lot of, I mean, I'm sure there are in Dutch as well, but there are a lot of English words that are exclusively reserved for women who
Yeah,
kind of overgrow themselves, if you like, in a male
yeah,
view or in a female view. And as you say, we do it too. We do it to ourselves and
yeah.
we do it to each other. So absolutely, we kind of, I'm very conscious always of treading
We
that.
censor ourselves, but I do less of it, and I aim to do less of it.
Yes, I think.
Because I care less about, what people think. I've also accepted that I'm somewhat of an odd person. Uh, so that gives me a lot of freedom as well.
Yes, no, exactly. I feel like I'm an odd person, whereas I've sort of previously tried to not be
To
odd,
hide that.
just odd to hide that. I
Yeah,
think now I feel it's okay. I can be eccentric if I want. I can be a bit weird, and I'm perfectly happy with that. So yeah,
yeah,
it's
yeah.
interesting. We both. So, what are you actually going to do to not be so accommodating, I suppose? Do you have actual specific things that you think you need to behave differently around?
Yeah, one thing is I was on Impact Days, which is a 2 day, say, a conference or gathering of impact investors. And I spoke with a woman who interviewed one of the Dutch astronauts. So, only a few hundred people have been in space, and two of them are Dutch, and one of them was at our conference. And she did it really well. And but later we got into a conversation of I said you also brought in, the more feminine perspective. Um, because of course, him looking from outer space, what happened to him is what has happened to most astronauts. Suddenly they see our globe, our Earth, without borders, and they see the fragility, and they measure, the layers of the atmosphere, and they go see, whoa, this is really, we need to protect this. That's basically what happens. And so a little detour the next day, we had someone who has a company, a man who has a company, and puts people with VR, virtual reality glasses, and they basically have the same astronaut experience. And
Wonderful.
then he described, 10 things that happen to people after that experience. That is that they feel compassionate, they feel in awe of the wonder, of the miracle of life. They feel like their place is small, but they could be significant, but they're more humbled. And when he went through those 10 points, I thought, he's describing a woman. He's really describing how it is for me. And so I got into this conversation with the woman who had interviewed the astronaut, and she said that she realized that all her life she'd like acted like a man, and she didn't even know what is it to be a woman. What is that actually? And I also don't really know. So I'm still finding out.
I suppose, none of us know what it is like to be the other, whatever that is, do we? We only have our own experience from inside, and from outside, we only see other people and hear what they have to say, but we don't
Yeah, but
actually.
what is it? I mean, it looks quite clear. Maybe men don't know how it is to be a man, and of course, the idea of man and how to behave also changes.
Yeah,
And but for women, it's also, of course, changing. And but yeah, it was interesting. But you asked me what do I love? I actually came away with from the eldest daughter retreat. We did an exercise called Next Steps, and it comes from the transformation game that was developed at Findhorn. And you have to come up with an intention.
ah,
And so my intention, a bit to my surprise, was I intend to feel loved. It's like, do I not feel loved? What is this about? So I didn't really completely understand it, but I understand it better now because I intend to feel loved by the cosmos and
cool.
feel like, there's this whole universe out there, and there's our little globe, our beautiful Earth here, zooming through space, and somehow through evolution, we've come, and you and I have manifested, and we are stardust. We are part of that evolving universe. And so that gives me like a sense of inner radiance.
Well, how lovely.
Lovely. And then you pick a card, an insight to help you, manifest that intention. And mine was your personality is radiant with creativity. And so on Sunday, when I was facilitating the World Cafe, which is a way to bring participants together and have them have meaningful conversations, I thought, I'm on this stage, I'm loved by the cosmos, and my personality is radiant with creativity. And that is really helpful. And so a setback, then you take a card, which is a setback, and it said, you feel a need to be always proving yourself to others at the expense of taking time to really listen and communicate.
Oh my goodness.
Now, this is exactly what we're talking about, right?
Yeah.
And then you take another insight, and which helps you to work with that setback. And it says, you released your expectations and attachments. Well, if I can do that. And then you take an angel, and an angel is kind of a field of, you can, a quality. And my angel quality was spontaneity. So I carry this with me, this piece of paper, because it helps me to free myself, continually and kind of see I am radiant with creativity because that's all there is. We are part of creation. Creation is creating all the time, and I'm co-creating with it. How amazing is that?
Well, I think
So that's my long answer to your question.
yes, yes. I mean, no, that's very inspiring, and I feel that all the things you said could equally apply to me as well at this point.
Mhm.
And I certainly feel that in this decade, I want to be able to express my creativity and be creative. I mean, I think that lots of things I've done have been creative. I mean, obviously, I've written
How
novels.
many books?
Uh, 14 books. But yes, I mean, and I am nearly halfway through the next novel now, so I'm feeling quite.
Already?
Yes, and it's not really already because I only do little snippets here and there, and I feel it's quite
Wow.
progress, and I want it to be finished sooner. But actually, I think it's, it takes processing time as well. It's not just actually the time you're sitting. I mean, like with any book, it's not the time you're just sitting with your fingers
But I
on.
think it has been gestating in
Yeah,
you for,
yes,
for a while you were diligently eldest daughter, as you are, doing your more kind of other book that your final book on book writing.
yes, that's right. That's right. Which I feel was the most creative version of what I've written so far.
Okay.
So I'm happy. I'm happy with that. But I also feel that things that I've done, like build businesses, are actually creative as well. That
Of
is
course.
creative work. I mean, it's not artistic in the same way that sort of books or art or is viewed, but actually it does take creativity, and I kind of need to acknowledge that, I suppose, and see that as part of my creative output.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And also, it's like you created something like a vessel for other people's creativity.
Yeah, yeah,
The publishing house, right?
yes,
And you invite and inspire people and also very much women to step into their authority.
yes,
And,
absolutely.
also kind of not play small, but write a book about things that they're really, knowledgeable about. That
Yes,
is their
yes,
expertise.
yes, yes, exactly. That is exactly what I want people to do. Indeed, indeed. And I do genuinely feel that it creates a book creates authority like nothing else does, particularly for women who feel a lack of authority. So it's a kind of externalization of it. They can see it, they can see and hold their
Yeah.
own authority, which is lovely. But I also think that for every woman who creates authority for herself, she is adding to the pool of authority and credibility for all women, which is, sadly lacking compared to
Yeah.
of men.
So
So,
there we can say we.
so there
And
we
I'm going
go.
to ask, because my intention, I intend to feel loved, is you had a book launch and you
Yeah,
were so scared that nobody would turn up. So
yeah.
did you, how was it? And did you feel loved?
Yes, you've just put your finger on it. I did exactly. I really did. As soon as people started arriving, I was really kind of panicking and uncomfortable. And in the car driving to London, I was thinking, oh, look, stop worrying about it. It'll all be over in 3 hours. You can forget it. You can move on. Doesn't matter if it doesn't, if it's an
If it's a
unsuccessful
total failure,
total failure.
yeah, nobody will show. Everybody was, oh, I've forgotten. Oh, I had something else more important. And
I know, yes. And then, we'd asked the team who I worked with on the Business Book Awards, who do fantastic sort of videos and photographs and document really the event. They were there, and I was kind of clearly. I must have been clearly panicking because they said to me, "Stop it, Lucy. We're here. We run events. This is what we do. So we're here to do this." So that was nice. That made me feel better. And then people, as soon as people started arriving, then I just relaxed, and that was fine. But I could not kind of bring myself to think that, I suppose, really, that people would come for me, because that's really what it was, or
yeah.
my and then they did, and it was
So
really.
that is so hard somehow to believe that you are, in a way, a loved, a regarded, a person that people want to be where you are and want to hear what you say and want to also support, the creations that you bring into this world.
Yes, it's really genuinely very hard for me to believe that. And but this event was lovely because I felt completely relaxed about talking, because obviously I knew everybody who was there, and I felt that I was among friends, so I wasn't giving a talk or a pitch. I was just talking, and I was able to kind of introduce them to, because we had the event was at the old Chelsea Library, which is a lovely old building, but it was my local library when I was growing up. And I used to go to the children's library there, and our house was just up the road. I mean, like 3 minutes walk away. So I explained that that's why we were there, and it was a lovely venue, everybody was very kind of pleased to be there, very welcoming as well as kind of bookish. In its way, the room we used was the old reference library, which actually I'd never been in before. But I also sort of showed them I had some slides, so I showed a picture of the library and then our house up the road, and then some old photos which I kind of placed on top of the house to show, my family there. And then I told them that the reason I had been able to book the library was that I had discovered my old school, which I used to go to not very far away, had moved into the library. It had become
Oh,
so, I tried. I'd always wanted this launch to be in that library, and I hadn't been able to find out who owned it. I hadn't been able to find a way of booking it or seeing if it was even available. And then I looked, because I was researching for the novel, I looked on my old school's website, and I saw that they'd moved into the library. So
yeah.
it was sort of like this.
Two locations in one.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So that was.
Yeah.
I mean, I think people, were kind of quite, that was a nice thing to be able to tell them. And then, yeah, it was just good. And I asked a couple of our authors to talk about their book journey, and that was very nicely done by everybody. And then, yeah, there was about 50 people there, which was perfect. And the caterers who the school used were just lovely, and they all wanted signed copies of the book, and I was able to sit at the librarian's table. And I don't know if you had, I'm sure you had the same,
Finally, finally.
to sign
Now
books.
you've made it.
One of those stamps, those date
Oh,
stamps
yeah.
that libraries used to have that go
Yeah.
chung. And I always wanted to be a librarian because of that when I was a child. So I decided to date stamp all the books I was signing as well.
Oh, wonderful.
It
A
was
childhood dream come true.
absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
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 So that was fun. But you have been on a big conference in the last couple of days, have you not?
Well, I have been. When I saw the years, I was in London because of the Systemic Investing Summit. And these past 2 days, I was at the PIM Impact Days. And the talk in investing, I would say pioneering investing in a healthy, connected world is very much about how many of the systems we live in come to the end of their lifetime, seem to come to the end of their lifetime. And so I have, for the past 30 years, kind of after my awakening behind my desk and starting to ask, painful questions of the companies I worked for, or honest questions, or real questions, and so the idea is to say that if this is like the current narrative for instance, in finance, the current narrative is if you have money, you have to make more of it. And the more you make, the better you are, the more successful you are. And but here, and we feel, we hit climate change, we hit, the financial, the poverty and riches, those gaps. There's so much dysfunctional in systems that have helped us come to where we are. So here are kind of pioneers building a new system, right? And they're kind of people, and then they kind of cluster, and now we're clustering more. And there's a lot of talk about, this system and the change from this one to the new one. And what I see and what I saw in London at that summit is there's a lot of seeing the system. If we understand how it works, and if we map it, and if we map what is needed, we can make the one intervention that will be really helpful. And I think my natural habitat is not so much seeing the system, but being the system. And I thought it was so interesting to see an astronaut who was, lots of material and huge amounts of fuel was propelled into space and then saw the planet. And it has, I think, from the first Apollo to the moon, been very helpful for all of us to have pictures of how our planet is as a whole, zooming through space. But I can also go into the cosmos, when I'm in silence, or I can go inwardly where there's also a huge cosmos. And I can also retrieve data here. They're different data from measuring and, studying. They're different data, but they're also data. So what I found interesting in our impact days is that it was a mix of kind of coming from the outside in and seeing the planet and then feeling compassion and then starting to act, or coming from the inside where, there is an awareness, the interconnectedness of all and everything and everybody, and then moving to outer action. And so my fantasy is to have a big room like these conference rooms with all the chairs to the side, like an old-fashioned kind of dancing school that we still went to, and I don't think exists in that way anymore. And then kind of have people stand for seeing the system, describing what they're doing, and people in being the system and describing what they're doing and seeing and sensing, and then people in between, and see how we can marry the two, because a child is a completely new creation from the inside out and the outside in, basically, to put it very graphically, like in the years.
Yeah,
So yeah, so that is going to be my next exploration.
that sounds fascinating. And is that specifically to do with investing? I mean, is it investing is the system, is the tool?
Well, investing is the theme that I kind of come through because I
Yeah,
do that.
yeah, that's your expertise.
And yeah, so yeah, that's my circumstances, and that's what I choose to do. And I choose to work with people who I think, and organizations are building a new system that where um, we don't invest necessarily to gain more money, but to have a fair compensation for making something available to someone.
So
And
what would the fair compensation be if it's not money? I mean, I don't
well,
know.
it can also be money, but for instance, I inherited shares because my father worked somewhere. And it's just by being born his daughter that I have these shares. And
Yeah,
now my nephews and nieces also have these shares. And there are children, now three in our family, and one more to come, um, are will be getting those shares. They didn't even know my father. And every year, out of this amazing company that has existed for over 125 years, which is a feat in itself, a company on average lives 20 years.
yeah.
Um, there's dividends. So their money comes out, which I feel is unfair compensation for the work that my father did. It's just unfair that this keeps coming, and it's wonderful.
You mean it's unfairly good? I mean, your father
Yeah,
did a certain amount of work, but somehow this just
yeah.
coming.
And
He
now money
gets
comes through
paid
our
for it.
family
Yeah,
basically as long as this company exists.
yeah,
And so in normal investing or in a stock exchange, you want those companies to grow and their value to grow, and then you grow more money. But why actually? Whereas in impact investing, you say, I want a greener, healthier life. I want everyone to have access to clean water. I want everyone to have access to education. I want to live in a world where people eat, where the soil is rich and the food is nourishing and the people are healthy. And so I can invest towards that. And I want that company to be successful because then, we do something for others and for the planet. And but I don't need that to give me money forever for the rest of my life. If I put, I say 100 in, and after 10 years I get 150 back, then with devaluation and taxes I've paid and costs I've had because of the management of it all, maybe I need a little bit more than 100 of it, but then that's fine. And then that's over. And then that company can go to a next round or can also be kind of self-owned, but not to be like this.
and then what technically happens? You step back, you sell your shares, you give your shares back. What's the mechanism by which you then
Yeah,
say,
so
I
there's
feel like that's
various
enough?
there's various mechanisms. Some companies like in PIMWIMIC, which is the co-op that I'm part of, where we have funds, some companies are bought by bigger companies who kind of have not done the research that this little company has done, and they kind of go like, wow, that's a real good asset for us to have, and we're willing to pay for the research they've done, because it would have cost us way more probably if we'd had a department and staffed and and so they're kind of gobble up a small company. In other cases, there's like next level investors. For startups, we invest a certain amount, and then you go for scale ups. There's other parties that do that. There's also something called a steward ownership, which answers my question that I tried to talk about with my father like 40 years ago, but we didn't get very far. And my question was, why don't companies belong to themselves? Why do they belong to shareholders? Why don't they belong to themselves?
So, the company as a person, if you like, you kind of invest personhood in the company.
Yeah, or as it is, you have like a company that is owned, the shares are owned by a foundation. And the foundation has the
Oh,
same mission as the company, and also guards that in the company there is no mission, dilution. Of course, times change, so what they do might be different. But if it is, say, working on healthy soil, yeah, something else is needed maybe in a different era. But then in the foundation there is a board of stewards who are representatives of the people running the company, but also of the suppliers maybe, or of the clients, or of nature, or of the town they are in. So together you kind of go like, you make sure this company stays on course and you help it where you can. And then the dividends, if any, if there's profit, like 50% can go to the foundation. And then the foundation, like for instance, with Zeiss, glasses,
Mhm.
is a huge, that's a Stewart-owned company. So it's not the Zeiss family that owns the company. It's some, well, on the stock exchange, but it's a Stewart-owned company, and Zeiss is one of the biggest investors for medical research in the world.
Wow, I did not know that. That's fascinating.
Yeah, and there's companies like Patagonia. There's also Bosch, where the family had the shares, and actually in their 60s and 70s, two daughters said, this isn't really right. This also isn't what our father wanted. So we're putting it in a foundation. We retain some, but we put it in a foundation, and that can do all kinds of things that are in line with the philosophy of the company.
Yeah, how well that's wonderful. I wonder how much though that speaks to, I mean, the big question is when do people feel that they have had enough? I mean, when they have got enough, when
Yeah.
it's a sort of, they've invested in something. At what point should they say, or can they say, emotionally speaking, I've got my return, I can
Yeah.
now step back? And it seems to me that a lot of people, possibly myself included, but I don't own any shares except in companies that I am connected with, that I work with,
That you have created.
so that I've created. So I don't have that investor experience, but I wonder at what stage people feel able to say, my investment's done enough for me. I can step back now.
Yeah.
And whether, I mean, most of the investors that I know who perhaps have invested in, one of my companies, and it's just angel investors, so it's small investments. But I mean, the main outcome, I
It's
think
like the
they
the
like.
three Fs. We call them the three Fs. It's friends, families, and fools. That's the first people to ask for money, right?
I, I don't have to call. I don't. Nobody feels like a fool for having invested
No,
in.
no, 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 no. But that's kind of the endearment term
Right.
for people who take, in a way, a high risk, because
Yeah, yeah. I mean, with Book Magic, we've had 2 rounds of angel investment, and I think everybody who has invested has believed in
yeah,
the goal, the project, as a good thing to happen.
yeah,
But also, they are looking to us building the company and exiting, and
yeah.
ultimately, what they're looking for is the payoff, is the money. And then I mean, this is small, and who knows what the payoff will be. But I can't see any of them saying, okay, well, just give me half of that. I don't need all of it. I mean, that's that. I
Well, I
think.
think it's a good conversation to have up front. So with steward ownership, that conversation you have up front.
Mhm.
And but the whole question of, what is actually enough is a really, really big question. And I think it's different for people, uh, for people's needs, but it's a really great question also to ask
Yeah,
yourself and other people. And they don't necessarily need to name figures, but what is actually enough? And one of my lovely, lovely, beautiful young friends, Liet van Beuningen, gave a beautiful talk on the second Impact Day, and also challenged us and said, if we are here wealth owners, then are we putting, are we risking, are we taking enough of a risk with our wealth if we really believe that, we can be helpful in this new story and these new systems, that still need to grow while the others are kind of in decline. It's such an exciting time.
yeah.
But yeah, this whole question of what is enough, and
Yes, I mean I mean you and presumably your kind of group of investors feel very different to me, to the wealthy people that I have experience of, who you think, I mean, I don't know. I feel that they start with an idea of wanting just more money to do certain things, but as their wealth grows, enough is never there. It's always, well, what else can, what else can we get? We could do
Yeah.
more. I could be richer. Why stop now? And
Yeah. Yeah. That's a very
it's
strange
always in
thing
the future. At
that
some
gets
point,
hold of people.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, I think the group that I'm in is more like, some people are embarrassed. There were two young women on stage who were quite embarrassed, that they're wealthy and also, and I felt that too. It's like, have I really had the chance to prove that I could be a person in this world when I had this huge safety net?
mm,
And when and it's people can say very disparagingly, "Oh, but you didn't need to work." No, that was true, but so there's things that come with that. But I think the people I'm with and who were there is kind of first and foremost, they seek a purpose for their wealth.
yes, yes. No, that is it. I mean, I say I've been through some really, really dicey financial situations, and a lot of what I've done in the last 20 years has been because I have become creative and done lots of things that if I had been more secure, if I had, for example, married well perhaps the old-fashioned view of this, I might simply not have done. I don't
Yeah,
know. I mean, I can't tell what I would have been like if I had
no, we don't know.
met. But
Yeah.
I've never. I mean, I can't say. I mean, I had a very privileged upbringing, but I haven't got. I don't think I've got the same level of safety net financially as you have. I mean, I know I haven't. So
Yeah, no, but I feel very exceptional and I feel lucky and I feel I've been able to do things because of that.
yes, yes, yes,
And
absolutely.
also, put other people in a position that they can do things like your angels. I love this
Yeah,
term, angel investor. I
yeah,
love being an angel to, young, talented people with a bright idea and a lot
quite
of
really
energy to
young.
make it happen. Huh? Oh,
Yeah,
you're not young. Well, all kinds of people.
no, I,
No, it's true. There was ageism there.
yeah, no, no, absolutely. It's fair, and it's different things motivate different people as well. And
Yeah,
I do see people, with secure financial positions being very generous and
yeah,
being able to do more things as well as you do, obviously.
yeah.
So
No, that's wonderful. That's people who completely lose the plot and start thinking they're important because they've inherited wealth, and
yeah,
then it's kind of empty. So, the put your money where your meaning is community, which is the Pimwimic co-op. Yeah, that's very much that. Put your money where your meaning is, and then
yeah,
you meet, and it was lovely. The first day, the Sunday was like family day, and the second day there's also fund. People have funds that you can invest in, but also kind of yeah, people who come like for the first time. And I was at a table with two men who'd recently sold their companies, and so you sell your company, and kind of now what?
yeah,
All of a sudden you have no place to go. You
yeah.
have all this money in the bank, and now what?
Yes, no, absolutely. I know somebody who did that, sold out a company for millions, and very shortly after had a massive nervous breakdown because
Yeah,
their meaning had gone.
the meaning had gone. You've lost kind of your identity,
Yes,
and you don't have your new identity yet. It's a bit like the old system, is going down, but you don't have the new system. You have to build this.
yeah,
And they were kind of, whoa, all these people here are so yeah, have a sense of purpose and meaning to their life and to their money.
yeah.
And are very open about what they invest in and are open about what has not worked out and what we've learned from that and what we are aiming to make happen. It's a wonderful community. I love being in that community.
Oh, how exciting. Well,
Yes. So
that's
there we are, back to love.
yes, yes. Well, how yeah, what interesting weeks we've had and all the
Absolutely. At 70 and a half.
yes, I think we can be pleased with ourselves for having a life that probably 70-year-olds of previous generations have rarely been able to access, perhaps.
Yeah.
Although, of course, some always have.
Yeah.
But yes,
Well,
well,
we'll talk again next week.
yes, we will. Yes, see what
Who
exciting.
knows what we'll talk about then? What will happen in our full and creative lives?
Okay, I will see.
Okay. Yes. Bye.
Bye.